Hi, I'm Festival Pyro, and right now I'm deep into studying anatomy, and whilst I have been making some real progress, something that's been holding me back have been heads. A couple weeks back I drew these 3 heads, and as you can see, they're not great. I wanted to dedicate a week to fixing them, learning how to draw a decent looking head, but then life happened and it took a bit longer than that. I did still follow the plan I'd made, and today I'm going to walk you through all that so that you can succeed where I could not. First of all, if you want to draw anything in 3D or in perspective, you've got to start with boxes. Boxes are the foundation of structure and perspective in drawing, so if you can't rotate a box in space, rotating a head is going to feel impossible. This box rotations exercise comes from the Drawbox course, or at least that's where I got it from. To be honest, whether or not you're a complete beginner, I still do recommend going through that course because I learned a lot from doing it last year, and many of the lessons, not just this one, are still relevant to me now. The idea of this exercise is pretty simple. You draw a series of boxes rotated around a center point, and whilst mine turned out a bit lopsided, the concept is still there. By doing it, you start to learn how to see in 3D. It teaches you how to draw converging lines on a flat page and helps you practice foreshortening without needing to map everything back to a vanishing point. If you want an extra challenge, you could try drawing a series of boxes in different perspectives all next to each other, something like this. It is harder though, so I would recommend going with the other methods to start. Also, don't worry about perfection, here or with any of the other exercises. The goal isn't clean boxes, shapes or lines. It's consistency and getting the practice in. The more you draw, the more often you repeat an exercise, the better you will be at it. And you'll notice improvement faster that way too, because you'll get more practice in, unlike if you were to spend hours on a single box or face. The skull is the perfect thing to study next because it bridges the gap between boxes and faces whilst also teaching you the basic proportions without the need to worry about eyes, lips or hair. That said, it's intimidating. It's full of weird angles, overlapping forms and those terrifying teeth. So instead of diving into a super anatomically correct skull, I found a simplified version to work from. This version let me focus on the big picture, and I'll leave a link to it in the description along with the link to next week's video, which goes into more detail about how I practice drawing the skull. Moving on from the skull, we have the Asaro head, a simplified model with flattened planes so that you can study light, shadow and form without getting lost in all the tiny details of an actual human face. I did make the mistake of studying this before the skull, and I would really not recommend following in my footsteps. It's a much better idea to look at the Asaro head second because it builds on the skull, adding muscle and tone while still keeping things relatively straightforward. Something you could do if you wanted to get more practice in is drawing a series of these heads right over your skulls. It might help you to see how the head evolves, and it's also a good first step to practicing real heads in perspective. Speaking of real heads, we have portrait studies. The running theme through the critiques that I got was that my portraits looked too symbolic, like I was relying on visual shortcuts instead of showing the form and lighting that makes a face look 3-dimensional. Something that I've learned this month from doing daily gesture drawings though is that I am much looser and more expressive when I draw traditionally. There's just something freeing about pen and paper that lets me loosen up, at least in comparison to working digitally, so I figured I might as well switch mediums and try doing a few of these in pencil. And here's what I drew. I don't think orange was the best choice of color, but they do show up better on camera than I was expecting, which is nice, and I am very pleased with them. The main takeaway that I had was that switching mediums and later on programs did make a big difference. I feel like a lot of people say that the medium doesn't really matter, but I do have to disagree. Maybe if you're already super talented and confident in what you're doing, then that's the case, but for me, the medium absolutely impacts how I work. Drawing traditionally takes a lot less time, so I can get more done in the same amount of time, and when I moved over to Clip Studio Paint, I noticed that my portraits felt a lot more organic too. They're by no means perfect, but they do feel closer to life and like I'm headed in the right direction. As for how you should do portrait study, experiment with your mediums. If you're used to traditional, maybe try digital. If you typically use pencils, try markers or paints. Try to find out what works best for you and just practice, because just like with anything else, the more you practice, the better you will get with time. So, and you do have all of these exercises as a starting point for what you could do to like continue improving. After getting through a bunch of these studies, you might notice that there's something consistently off. Maybe your noses are a bit crooked or your ears too big. For me, it was my eyes and lips. Eyes are the window to the soul, right? They're expressive, emotive, and crucial to capturing a specific emotion. Yet, in all the studies I've done, they seemed small, flat, and kinda dead. My lips were no better, either always overly symbolic or just straight up non-existent. So instead of jumping ahead to the exercise I was most excited about, I decided to pause and focus on these areas. And I recommend you do the same. If you've you've got the time, you could even do this with each part of the face. It's never a bad idea to get more targeted practice in. I didn't do anything special really, just filled 2 exercise sheets with eyes and lips from all different angles and in different positions. In case you'd like to do the same ones as me, I'll have the sheets linked in the description. The biggest thing this exercise helped me with in terms of eyes was understanding their roundness. I'd been drawing them super flat, but once I began treating them as spheres, with eyelids wrapping around the form, the whole thing started to feel more alive. And I think I managed to capture the expressiveness of the reference images too. The same thing happened with lips. Drawing them as 3D shapes with volume and all that made them feel much more realistic. With the last few I did, I even experimented with a bit of stylization because I felt like I understood the underlying forms, so I wanted to have a bit more fun. Whilst this may have not been the most exciting thing for me to do, it did end up being super helpful. It also took some of the pressure off because instead of having to worry about all of the different parts of the face working and looking right together, I could just focus on one thing at a time. It did also help me quite a bit when I moved on to the next thing. And the next thing, otherwise known as the thing I was looking forward to the most, was style studies. These are so fun to do, whether you already have a style you're aiming for or like me, you're kind of just figuring it out as you go along. If you have a time lapse you can follow, you also don't really have to think as much whilst doing them because someone else has already done that for you. The 3 artists that I chose to study were Shinon, who's pretty much my biggest inspiration, Kid Citrix, whose style is just so damn good, and R. Rikinen, who creates the most gorgeous digital sketches. I started with Shinon mostly because his style felt the most approachable and also I was looking forward to it the most. I followed along with 2 of his shorts where he drew these heads and I am very happy with how they turned out. I used Clip Studio's default pencil brush for the sketch and then switched over to the perfect pencil brush for the line art. I really do love the simple and graphic look that they ended up having. Now, I don't think Kid Citrix posts any process videos, or at least I can find any of them, which did make things a lot more difficult for me, and I ended up having to abandon 2 of the 3 heads that I attempted because I just could not figure out how to approach them, and the first one was also looking kind of creepy, so that did kind of put me off that one. But the one I did finish, I'm very happy with. The face turned out beautifully. I was so happy with the shading, the freckles, the hair. If I had to pick just one of these styles to study forever, even though it was kind of hard, it would definitely be this one. The style is sharp but soft, expressive yet controlled. It's literally just amazing. I love it. And then finally, we have R. Rikinen, pretty sure it's German, but I don't know how to pronounce it. The only reason I'm not calling theirs the hardest is because they post their time lapses, so I had something to follow along with. Even with that though, the face you'll see in the corner took me over an hour and a half to do, and eventually I just had to give up because I did not want to be spending any more time on it. That said, I do still love how it turns out because it's like sharp and angular and there's this incredible sense of structure underneath everything. You can really tell that R. Rikinen knows their anatomy inside and out, and honestly this study alone is probably the reason I didn't completely fail at the final exercise that I did, so that's a big plus for this one. The goal with doing these art studies isn't to find a style that you want to completely replicate, but instead it's meant to help you figure out what you like, what elements of other people's art really speak to you, and what you want to continue building on in your own practice. For example, for me, I found that I really liked working with pencil texture brushes. I found shading way more enjoyable than I thought it would be, and I seem to be drawn to styles that have a sharpness and strong sense of structure to them, so those are all things that I want to continue exploring. If you've never done a style study before, do it. Pick some artists that excite you, break down what you love about their work, and don't be afraid to mess up along the way. You'll learn more than you think, even from the ones that don't turn out right. Finally, the last exercise. Some might even consider this the hardest one because unlike everything else we've done so far, this time there's no reference, no guidelines, no helpful time-lapse to follow along with. It's just you, your brain, and whatever you can pull from your imagination. This final exercise is actually the same one that kicks this whole thing off, and that is drawing 3 heads in rotation completely from your imagination. And the improvement that I've had over the past couple of weeks is in my opinion incredible. I went from not being able to draw a 3/4 view to save my life, drawing side profiles that looked heavily questionable, to being able to draw both of those and have them look pretty damn good. Of course, they aren't perfect, there's still plenty of issues, but the fact that I was even able to pull this off, huge win in my books. Hopefully, if you've been following along and doing each of these exercises yourself, you too have seen a big improvement in your work. And hey, if you do decide to share it somewhere, feel free to tag me in it because I would love to see what you've created and how you've grown. As a little bonus, I did a sketch of my persona, aka me, and I'm really pleased with it. It took a bit too long for my liking, so I didn't really feel like rendering it, but it was a fun way of applying everything I'd learned. My sibling recognizing it was me straight away was also like a huge win for me, so that was really nice. And yeah, that's it. A full week's worth of exercises for learning how to draw faces. I'll leave some helpful resources down in the description, but other than that, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!